She was born in Hartford, Connecticut, was a policy advisor in the Brian Mulroney government, and counts herself as a family friend of Bill Clinton's. To help us better understand Green Party leader Elizabeth May, the person, we welcome back to TVO Anne Kingston, senior writer with Maclean's magazine. And Anne, welcome back. As we welcome you back here, let's just go through a bit of a fact file here on Elizabeth May. She was born in Hartford, Connecticut, as we suggest, June the 9th, 1954. June the 9th, incidentally, same birthday as the leader of the Green Party of Ontario. She is the eldest of two, as a younger brother. She moved to Nova Scotia with her family when she was 18, becoming a Canadian citizen in 1978. And she is, yes, the first Green Party member ever to win a seat in the House of Commons, and also has the Order of Canada. She's an officer in the Order of Canada. You did a piece on her, Anne, several years ago, the headline of which was, "Could the Queen of Green be mean?" And let's start there. That seems like a good question. She seems like, most of the time, one of the sunnier personalities up on Parliament Hill. She got a mean streak in her anywhere?
Well, in my defense, I did not write the headline, and I don't think I ever used the word mean in the story. However, the piece does look into a very complex personality. The sunny side is the one the public is familiar with, but she is a far more complex individual, and I spoke with people who saw another side of her that, if not mean, was difficult to deal with occasionally.
Tell me more. What's that other side we don't tend to see?
Well, I think when I wrote the piece, the timing is important here. It was in 2007. She had been nominated the leader of the Green Party by big acclamation, but she was dealing with a party that was in a fractious state. On one side, people didn't know whether they were a social movement, a political party. She came from an activist background, and that very much informed her politicking, as did her previous kind of government involvement. So there was a lot of people didn't like her style. They thought she was too much of a grandstander, that she was too autocratic, that she wasn't going with the flow. And she was doing what she needed to do at the point to make the Green Party a viable political party.
And she has, in fairness, put it on the map. I mean, she really has.
She certainly put herself on the map. And in the process, I think the party has come with her.
Oh, okay, that's an interesting distinction. Has she put herself on the map or the party on the map?
I think both. I think that the two have become synonymous, which is, I think, an issue within the Green Party itself. For instance, one of her first big, bold moves, and this is a woman, let's remember, she comes from a position of having done hunger strikes in front of the House of Commons in the past. She's very good she's a media magnet, and one of the first things she did when she was the leader of the party was run against Peter MacKay, which in central Nova Scotia, long-held Tory stronghold, MacKay stronghold. Everybody thought it was a suicide mission, but it was canny in a way because it also got the spotlight on her, even though it didn't win a seat. So there's always been that friction within the party, and people left the party because they didn't think that she was being too strategic about getting her own name out there as opposed to actually winning seats, which is more complex.
Let's go back. What do we know about what kind of childhood she had growing up in New England?
Well, if you actually look at her childhood, she's genetically predetermined to be doing what she's doing now. She was born, as you said, in Hartford, posh insurance town. She grew up, her father worked in insurance, but both her parents, particularly her mother, were social activists. Highly successful too. I mean, their work in a grassroots organization determined Kennedy's position on dismantling nuclear testing. She was very much involved in, she calls herself a prop in Washington marches as a young child, where she was the face of innocence. So she, at a very early age, learned about the collaborative kind of grassroots and the benefits of that kind of approach.
Why did the family move to Canada?
Well, I think they got tired of their tax dollars going to pay for napalm. It was, again, a political gesture.
Her own words suggest she was, quote, extremely productive during her early years in Nova Scotia. Doing what?
Well, she worked, I mean, she didn't take a logical trajectory, or traditional, I shouldn't say logical. She worked for the family, ran a money-losing restaurant near the Cape Breton Trail, and she worked for the restaurant. She went to Smith in the States for a year. Smith College, okay. Dropped out, and she worked for the family firm, as it was, and she as a waitress, and she also was very much engaged in ecological, political kind of activism, fighting successfully against the province on a sort of initiatives that got film coverage. An NFB film was made about part of her activism, and she eventually went to Dalhousie, but as a mature student when she was 26.
Law student, yes?
Law student. She graduated from law.
She kind of morphed into this country's version of Erin Brockovich in a way, didn't she?
Well, yes, but it's sort of this mired in procedure, which is, I suppose, the Canadian way of doing it. She didn't love working for a law firm. She ended up working for the Mulroney government as an advisor to Tom Maclean, a move many of her sort of colleagues saw as selling out, but she was incredibly effective. And what she did was a kind of this pan-collegial, pan-party, non-partisan, she worked with everybody in a way that pissed off the Conservatives occasionally, but was incredibly effective. Her work has been credited with South Moresby Park in BC. She worked on nuclear rain work treaties and so forth, so nuclear acid rain. So she figured out how to work the system.
And when people want to sort of say that she criticizes all Conservatives and it's all partisan, the fact is she thought the Mulroney government, relatively speaking, compared to this Conservative government, had a pretty good environmental record.
Which it did, comparatively, definitely.
She then went to the Sierra Club.
Yes.
Could one tell what kind of impact she had outside politics with a special interest group sort of trying to make change from the outside?
Well, she was trying to make, she worked both on the outside. She was involved in the Rio Summit, but she also worked very closely with the Liberals, which has been another thing that has come back to haunt her within the Green Party itself, at least in the early days. And she worked closely with Stéphane Dion. She worked on Kyoto, and I think that work. And she tried to broker an alliance between the Greens and the Liberals unsuccessfully. And I think all of that paved way for her eventual run in 2006 to lead the Green Party.
It's still quite, I think, in both parties considered quite controversial that she had a kind of a non-aggression pact with the Liberals. She agreed not to run against Stéphane Dion in his riding, and
yes,
he agreed not to run a Liberal candidate against her in her riding. Why didn't that pick up? There was no pickup on that, right?
In no pickup in what sense?
In the sense that it seemed the two leaders were fine with that policy, but none of the troops went along with it.
Well, I think those within the Green Party that wanted to become a political party were annoyed at the fact that their leader was thinking strategically and not building the base of the party. But I think that you have to factor Stephen Harper into this entire equation. And Stephen Harper was, at least in the early days, Elizabeth May's white whale. He was the reason, I think, that animated her movement into the political realm. His policies his attitude toward Kyoto drove her into politics. And I think that blockading him at every opportunity was part of her thinking in the early days, at least.
Do you see her more as an activist still or as a politician?
I think that she will always be looking at the big picture, one beyond politics. So I would say activist, but I think that she's very clever in adapting.
Meaning what?
In figuring out how to get what she wants in a bigger sense, and that often means she's excellent at conciliatory behavior, particularly within power nexuses. It's areas where there's not as much power that become problematic with her.
Because I wonder about her. She fancies herself a former Sunday school teacher, and she's I think she's studying to become an Anglican church minister as well.
She is studying theology.
So there is this assumption that she can't think like a craven, strategic, self-interested politician. Is that true? Does she not do that?
I think she's capable of it, certainly. I think that, it's interesting you mentioned the religious aspect, which is part of her public identity and part of very much intrinsic to who she is. Yet she's not in any way. She has a moral certitude to her behavior, certainly, but she's also not a sanctimonious person at all, and that's part of her charm, I think. She doesn't play up the Sunday school teacher.
Well, it's funny. Bob Rae, the former Premier of Ontario, former interim national leader of the Liberals, talking about her crusading spirit, says sometimes she's a bit too self-righteous, but that's part of her theological makeup. She can't help it. The thing about why she aggravates some people is she's entirely her own person. What would you say to that?
I think that's a very good assessment. I don't know to what extent theology is a part of that. I think that it was something that has been essential to who she is since childhood.
So her religiosity plays some role in her environmentalism as well, is that right?
I think everything is connected. I think that the natural world is precious to her, and that was something that was part of part of her childhood. There's this anecdote that was told, or she actually tells it, where she looked up at the sky as a child and saw planes trailing across the sky, and she said to her mother, said, "Why is the plane scratching the sky?" So it's a very poetic image. It's a Elizabeth May flourish, but it's that type of, I think, attention to detail that is part of who she is.
Let's finish up on this. We love to think Jimmy Stewart, right? That character who goes to Washington, the one politician who can make a difference. We love to think in a House of Commons of 338 people, one lonely voice of a member of Parliament can make a difference. What's the truth? Has she, as an oftentimes lonely green in a sea of blue and orange and red, has she made a difference up there? I
think she has. I mean, one can look at her Lyme National Action Plan that was passed last year, which was quite an accomplishment. It's an important bill. It's something that other people weren't able to affect. It's an issue that is misdiagnosed, misunderstood, something that touches environmental concerns. I think that her ferocity, her fact-checking, her keeping other people in check with that sense of moral certitude has meant a difference on Parliament Hill. Now, what it means for the Green Party, we'll see. I think this election will be very telling.
And your magazine has named her Parliamentarian of the Year, so they think she's up to something good.
Absolutely.
Okay. Anne, good of you to come in again.
My pleasure.
Anne Kingston, senior writer, Maclean's Magazine.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.